Welcome to MetaPod, the podcast where we discuss operational execs and organizations that make and move stuff, and our common headaches, digital transformation, the forever labor shortage, and doing more with less. And now, the host of MetaPod, Ron Crabtree.
Okay, so it's Ron Crabtree back here for the next edition here of MetaPod. We're trying to get into those three common challenges organizations are facing, the forever labor shortage, digitization and digital transformation pressures, and then just having to do more with less. And our guests today are Rishi Patil and Mike Collins with a company called Stovinen. And I think we're really going to enjoy their perspectives because I hear so many people want to talk about the shiny objects, technology solves all our problems. And I've been saying in my episodes, I'm not a big believer in that. It's a little more complicated and there's a lot of pieces. I think you're really going to enjoy them talking about the evolution of digital technologies, some examples and solutions that you could be leveraging going forward. So we're going to start with some diagnostics. They picked three key areas where, any organization, especially if you're involved with tangible goods, really should be looking at these things and being aware of the threats and opportunities therein. Then we're going to pivot back and get into, the diagnostics of their advice of what do you do if, in fact, those kinds of things are a challenge for your organization. So they'll go without saying, digital technology is moving rapidly, crazy fast. And I'm looking forward to hear what Rishi and Mike have to say. So with that, gentlemen, introduce yourselves.
Mike, you want to go first?
Sure. So Mike Collins, COO, one of the founding partners, been in the operational consulting business for, it seems like endless years, but it's about 35 years, started in the operation delivery side, which I think gives you a good grounding of problem solution, DMAIC, Lean, Six Sigma, and so forth. So that now we have the evolution of digital. You can think in terms of operational and the best case fit for it. I moved into what would be called business analysis around 16, 17 years ago. So I'd be the guy that would come in and call your baby ugly, but I'd say, but wait, we can help you with that and quantify the benefit and the value proposition of that. And was successful in multiple industries, mining, oil and gas, service sector, call centers, and so forth, finance, manufacturing, consumer packaged goods. So it's pretty much the Swiss Army knife of business over many, many years. But I think that I used to say, some people say it's not the generalist of many versus the master of one specific, but I think that's actually worked out well because it gives you a good, well-rounded understanding of what goes on in it. During the pandemic, I pivoted into industry. I got heavily involved in COVID testing and so forth, and then became very entrepreneurial. But during my consulting years, had met my partner, Rishi Patil, and he'll explain more about Stovinen, but it seemed like a marriage made in heaven with his also well-rounded knowledge from operational consulting, but his really forward thinking from technology. And it just seemed for the two of us that there had to be a better way for doing operation consulting. There's a lot of consulting firms out there. Many nowadays on LinkedIn and other channels seem to profess their greatness in AI and ML, but, we would say that Skovinen are more very Odin specific on that technology. So we have just enjoyed the ride for the last 4 years and people are just embracing it because they can see the benefit and value of combining operational consulting with technology. Rishi?
All right. So before Rishi goes, I want one of you to tackle. I really was fascinated with the branding around and the name Stovinen. So one of you needs to tell the story about how that happened.
Oh, that'll be my friend Rishi.
Well, over to you, Rishi.
Why don't I'll start with just talking about a little bit about myself and then talk about Skovinen. So my name is Rishi Patil. I spent about 20 years in the management consulting space. Got my start in the US working for some large consulting firms, well-known consulting firms, including Hitachi and a few others. And my last job before founding Skovinen was as head of data analytics. So as we were implementing data analytics, we realized that inside an operations consulting arena, we realized that there's a disconnect between what technology firms typically offer and how management consulting companies approach these things. And we realized that there's a space in there there's a niche in there where using that combination of operations consulting, classical management consulting techniques, and advanced analytics, machine learning, deep learning, and this wave of AI that was coming in, that we saw coming in about 10 years ago, that would create a result that was much better than than essentially having those two things being looked at just individually. And that kind of tails into why we chose the name Skovenant. So Skovenant is a portmanteau of two Scandinavian words that mean random forest. Random forest is one of the main machine learning algorithms. And the significance of a random forest is that there's essentially what's called decision trees that make a decision, but then a forest of those decision trees gives a result that's much better than the sum of its parts. So the significance of that is we bring together people from technology, from operations, and from different backgrounds with different knowledge. And that combination, in our opinion, gives a much better result than what has been possible before if you're only looking at process people, change management, or if you're only looking at technology. So Skovenant, in short, is a blend of those two things, and that, in our opinion, gives much better results.
All right. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Awesome. Well, I think it would be fun now to get into the diagnostics, those three key areas you think any organization should really be thinking hard about. And be careful that, if it's jargon or technical, be sure to define that because, think about our audience as being executives that need to walk down the hall and ask good questions and determine, is this an area we really need to be addressing in the future or not? So I'll just let you guys tackle whatever that first diagnostic is you want to offer.
Well, the first thing we're always looking at and being asked for, Ron, from clients, because it's a great leadway, a great segue, is regarding labor force. We see that across all gamuts of verticals and sectors that we're working on. And it may be the challenge that they have either during the pandemic, as a consequence of the pandemic, no one was hiring consultants during the pandemic. It was survival of the fittest, really. So a lot of companies had to make tough decisions regarding labor. They allowed a bunch of people, and some people got laid off, etc. So when the businesses got to that point, it was hard for them to bring people back on. The dynamics had changed at the end of the pandemic, etc. So there was a shortage of labor.
And then you had the Great Resignation going on and a whole bunch of other dynamics that were just turning things on its side.
I think you said it well. I think also you had the realization for companies that we had to do it a different way when we get back and we flipped the switch, either because of costing challenges that they were now faced. How can I do what I did without? I'll be blunt, without as many folks as out there. What can we really do? And the other side was there's going to be core individuals that they want to bring back into the company, but how can I upskill them now? Because if I'm really thinking ahead and for planning, I need to think, does the skill set of the yesteryear match my needs for tomorrow? So we get called in a lot for what would be thought of as being operational consulting challenges. We have a lean operation challenge, maybe it's a supply chain, maybe it's on the manufacturing floor. But at the end of the day, human capital is going to be involved in it somehow, either because of upskilling or job displacement, training, and so forth. So how can Skovenant help you with that challenge of either moving and repositioning labor? Because we always, Rishi and I, we're kind of trying to be the good guys. But the first thing we say is, what else can people do, right? Because the company wants to grow. So with the new challenges and with the AI, how can we repurpose a function so that it can now be ready and set for the next stage?
So let me ask you, can you share a little example here, right? For us that don't necessarily understand what you just said, give us an example of, for example, this is what we're looking at, and this is what we uncover, right? So I'm guessing, the organization has some form of strategy or objectives, but what are we looking for? What's the evidence there's really an opportunity there, and how would you measure that in some way?
Well, from an operational standpoint, we always start with, let's say, to be a perfect example of that one, a manufacturing. We work a lot in the manufacturing space. And we look at what's called the value stream, the end-to-end process. And we look at value-added versus non-value-added. Now, people can take that personally when you start talking about non-value-added tasks, right? It doesn't mean the entity. People can only do what they need to do given the training, the position, the roles, responsibilities that they had. But now with AI, machine learning, and modern technology, that particular routine task may and can be replaced using technology. That's just a fact. So the only way you can flush that out is stage one, understand the process. So first thing I do as an analyst, as an operational guy, is I go in and I understand the value stream. What are the specific actions being taken, by whom, when, how are they communicating, what do they need to be successful, what information do they need, what information do they give on, or materials they pass on to the next stage of the process. Once you've laid that out, you can have serious dialogue to say, okay, and again, you're going in with the mindset of not, how can I get rid of the people? But it's a mindset of, okay, how can I get process efficiency and productivity, still deliver a quality product, and then that time that was being used by labor, how can I reposition that to add greater value at another part of the process?
All right, so you're doing kind of a current state, future state. What kind of delta do you normally uncover, current performance versus possible future performance? What's a typical delta you might see, and how might that manifest?
Well, obviously we do kind of time studies, etc. So whether it be the skills of the supervisor and how they're utilizing their time with, manually without using the aid of technology to help them, like dashboards or real-time reporting, you'll see uplifts of 30, 40% productivity. I mean, it's just fact, because you have that, you have, now the enabler of technology that can be used in order to drive that. Obviously it's not a magic bullet though, right? I mean, you're not going to say, well, with technology, a month, a week from now, a day from now, a month from now, we can re-strategize how our labor is. It takes an evolution, and it certainly takes upskilling and training. But you see 30, 40% opportunity,
And Ron, we're, as Mike said, we are actually looking at this pretty holistically. So as an example, when we were working with this logistics company, we observed that initially their main problem seemed to be that they were essentially performing the entire dispatch process very manually. So it was a lot of labor, a lot of effort in trying to coordinate between all of the trucks and the drivers, and then staffing them on a daily basis, and sometimes multiple times a day. So there's a lot of back and forth interaction going on between the dispatchers and the drivers. And all of that, even though they had somewhat of a basic TMS system, it was really hard to manage. So if you just think in terms of software, you would be looking at, okay, what features do I want in the TMS? What modules do I want? And we felt that that's a very narrow view to take. So we kind of took a step back and said, what's the value stream? What are they actually doing in the process? What are they trying to achieve, right? So from that perspective, then we started looking at, okay, there's a lot of paperwork that the drivers need to have, for legal reasons, and, that's how it's done. So we said, okay, instead of trying to basically have just a software solution, can we take a step back and have them leapfrog over some of these issues? So they have to use the paperwork anyway. So we essentially built them a system that can take a picture of that. Those,
so let's not get ahead of ourselves, because you're giving us a solution for the problem.
Okay.
But here's what I just heard, and I agree 100%, is unlike other, things you might hear, it's not a solution with a problem, looking for the problem. You're saying, no, let's understand the problem. Where the real gaps are in skills, where the real gaps are in terms of where we're going to need more people in the future, and can we avoid hiring people by getting more done with the resources we have? So you're really doing a great job of problem definition, and then later saying, okay, now let's get very specific and laser focused about technology. I want to come back and talk about what to do. But I agree, everything you've said here is right on with my view. Is, it's not technology, it's not this technology solves all problems, but it's really understand what good looks like and how we're going to measure that, and then back into the correct technology solution. Am I beginning to get that right?
Absolutely. And also, whenever there's a step change in the technology, so when we talked about, the advent of computing in the 70s and 80s, or you talk about the internet really affecting things in the late 90s, early 2000s, whenever there's a step change like that, you have to look at essentially the entire value stream. You can't have point solutions. Okay, now I have ChatGPT, therefore I'm going to use it for this particular purpose. You got to look at it. How is essentially this fundamental technology change? How is that going to affect different parts of your organization? And what do you need to do differently? And you need to think of it holistically. You can't start with the solutions and then work backwards.
Perfect.
I think, Ron, that emphasizes why we love the value proposition of Scobin. I mean, we're kind of like the Neapolitan ice cream. We always look at it through the three lenses of the people, the process, and the technology, and its best form, fit, and function, what's going to be required to it. But we're very passionate, and I'm glad we led with this, and I appreciate the opportunity, Ron, with the labor side of it, because at the end of the day, it's not just binary, ones and O's. It's human people, and lives are changing. And how can we as a company best think in a strategy? And ironically, that's where we also start with, Ron, is not just in the value stream. It starts with the executives. Have they really got a strategy that's aligned to especially the labor force of tomorrow?
All right. So before we move on to the next diagnostic, we pivot, get to the next thing. Anything else about, labor cost, turnover, training, education you want to touch on before we pivot to the next diagnostic?
Well, definitely on the training. I mean, we see that as a key thing, right? You can onboard talent, or you can, take value in the folks that you have. And we think the latter is the primary thing. So doing those online trainings, and I think there's also a burden for the employee themselves. I think that people have to be cognizant of what the world's doing now in terms of technology. And there's a responsibility down to the employee level to also look at what online training courses there are. There are a lot of them out there. I think they're called, massive online, open online courses that the people can take so they can become self-aware as well. There's nothing better than the employee coming to the boss and going, hey, boss, I'm learning Python, or I'm learning development, I'm learning machine learning, to be an enabler and a catalyst for that very change. It shouldn't just be forced upon you. We want to try and encourage the employees to see that light and want to be on that journey.
Perfect. Anything else, Rishi, before we move to the next thing here?
No, I think we covered.
Okay. Right. So the next topic they're going to get into, I'll let them do that, but I wanted to create a correlation between the next topic and what we just talked about. And it's creating a hunger for learning and, us kind of fueling people's interest in what's coming down the road and what I need to do differently in the future. Really, really important from a workforce development perspective. So with that, let's get into that next diagnostic. What would that be and why, and what are we looking for?
Sorry, Rishi, but the first thing, again, we look operationally is, do they have a strategy, right? I mean, the leadership need to really, we go into businesses and they have their mission, vision, and values. Well, with all due respect, the mission, vision, and values may not be as pertinent today, given the flurry of technology that's coming up, right? So we need to take a step back as a company and really look at how we can hone our strategy so that incorporates and embraces AI now and in the future. And then the other part of that is your strategy needs to foster innovation. Even before technology, when Rishi and I would go to the job floor, the work floor, and talk to the employees, there was always that, if only leadership would listen to us. So some of the greatest ideas come from the workforce themselves, because they're the ones every day challenged with the constraints that business presents to them. Well, now that's on acid. It's high speed. Now these folks are going home and they're seeing some incredible things. I mean, they're all using ChatGPT and things like this. So when they come to work, as a leader, you've got to encourage that and start having roundtable discussions and how we can work together using this technology and create an environment of fostering it, and then put it in a roadmap. What's plan A, plan B, plan C, and help, using cross-functional teams to develop that strategy.
So let me ask a question here. This is a good segue. Now, I've been paying keen attention to success and failure around digital transformation for many years now, and all the data I'm seeing out there, the big consulting companies and the experts are saying, 60, well, it depends on who you ask, but it's between 67 to 70 to as much as 80% failure to deliver real value from a digital transformation initiative. How much of that would you ascribe directly to, really failing to be prepared, right? And being willing to change at every level. How much of that would you agree, A, and then B, how would you correlate that?
So I believe that that's a large root cause of why digital transformations fail. Essentially, as we mentioned, when you're looking at it from a lens of purely software or purely management consulting, operations consulting, then you're failing to essentially look at the different aspects that essentially bring things together, right? So as an example, just to give you one example, when we look at, for example, inventory management, or you want to look at capacity planning, production planning, when you start with, okay, what do I have in terms of demand forecasting, right? That's kind of the first step to start that journey. It's not enough to just say what softwares are available out there that are going to help me improve my demand forecasting. Because in addition to actually having a methodology that improves your demand forecasting, you really need to take a step back and look at, okay, so now I have better forecast accuracy. What am I going to do differently in order to actually embed that into my way of working? So now I have a better forecast. What inventory do I need to carry? What is my economic reorder point? What is my stock levels for each SKU? There's a lot of change that's going to happen as a result of that improved forecast accuracy. And that in turn essentially has an impact across the entire organization. So if you don't plan for that holistically and taking a look at the entire value chain, then that's a reason for failure. Because if you're just looking at it as a technology implementation and say, I'm going to spend $1 million on installing some software, it's a very narrow viewpoint.
Sounds like PSYOP on steroids. And for those who aren't familiar with that, in the practice of Six Sigma is carefully mapping out the suppliers, the inputs, the actual processes, and then the outputs, and then finally the customers and their needs, but understanding the stakeholder needs across that continuum. And by the way, suppliers can also be customers. Because quite often we have customers we sell to that supply us information, and how good that is and how well we use it and how effective that is directly impacts our ability to perform on the back end. So it's wickedly difficult. So sorry to sidebar you there. Anything else around this preparedness part you guys want to talk about? What should we be looking for and why?
Yeah, I think maybe Rishi, you can add on to this, please, if you can, especially from the data side of it. But I think that, because it's a brilliant point you bring up, Ron, is that why does it fail? Why does it not succeed every time? And what are the challenges? There's also a mindset challenge, but there's also the literal sense of we don't have the data. Historically, we've never captured the data, or we don't trust the data. So it's data integrity and data acquisition is sometimes a challenge. They go, well, we're not ready for you yet. Come back in a few years' time when we've data. And then because, without the data, how can we be on a data-driven digital transformation? And there are ways around that. We work with the clients in order for them to acquire data, because sometimes the data exists, but not in the format they're thinking of. There's no hard drive with it. So we go, well, you obviously capture this information somehow. They go, well, look at this filing cabinet over here. It's, we're blowing the dust off. It's got 3 years worth of logs that someone's handwritten. We're like, so there's data. We just haven't converted it into usable data. So we work with the clients to try and dispel the fact that you need 10 years worth of catacombs of data cloud information. And then the other side that Rishi is very passionate about is the privacy and integrity of that data and what you do with the data once you get it.
Yeah, no, Ron, I'd like to add a few points there. So essentially, if you look at data from a perspective of it's all going to be stored, or I want to get everything into SAP first, I want to get everything into a CRM first, that journey itself, you could be spending the next year or 2 or 3 on that journey. And I'm not saying it's not important. That journey is obviously very important to have data lakes and CRMs and ERP systems all configured nicely. That's all great. However, in today's day and age, where you have the ability to take data that's in almost any shape or form and leapfrog over that. And so what I'm saying is essentially you can take data that's in paper format, in PDF format, it's or it's unstructured data that's coming from customers, using artificial intelligence technologies such as LLMs, you can essentially extract that data much more easily than was possible even 5 years ago, and have a solution in place while you're working on the SAP or the CRMs for the next 2 years, right? So you can get the solution today for the specific problem that you're trying to solve. So as an example, again, going back to the demand forecasting example, or I also talked about the logistics company where they had paper-based information, stored in the file cabinet. In any of those examples, if you're trying to solve the problem, like, okay, I want to actually reduce inventory, or I want to improve my time to invoice in terms of logistics, right? If that's the problem you're trying to solve, let's not have SAP hold you back, or let's not have CRMs hold you back, because you can have the solution today or in a couple of months or a few months while you're working on the big picture of data. But your problem today, if your problem today is I've got too much inventory or I have stockouts, and if you're trying to address that, then let's not wait for that. We can take whatever data you have, whether it's in the PLC, whether it's in or stored on paper, whether it's coming from customer records in customer service. We can work with that, extract that, transform that, and then build a solution, custom solution, to solve that specific business problem.
Okay. So we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but that's okay, because go ahead.
Ron, just to add to it, I think one of the other benefits that we have working with the companies is that when we first started getting involved, everyone thought that this new line of technology was, only there for the big player companies. And I am thinking, so does Rishi, that the beauty of this is modern technology, digital technology, is a level playing field for even the smaller businesses. There are companies out there, consulting firms, that don't touch clients that have less than $1 billion worth of revenue. Well, hang on a second. Every man can use these large language models and RAG technology, which we'll talk about later. But
yeah, I'm going to want you to define that in a minute.
And that's the beauty of it. I mean, we can apply now a solution in a matter of weeks versus months versus years at a very good investment for the firm with a great ROI, and do it as a segue if they want to use a bigger platform later down the road. And I love that for the smaller companies. It does level the playing field for businesses now.
All right, perfect. I want to segue into that third area of diagnostic, and to kind of sum it up here around this second diagnostic is, the willingness, the preparedness for change, but you're advocating that that's very focused around the specific business outcomes, what good looks like. You're not trying to boil the ocean here. You're really helping, to analyze, do I have the information, the mindsets, everything in place that can actually do something about it, and just are we ready to actually leverage digital transformation, get all these benefits? So the third area here I'm really looking forward to hearing more about is there is a plethora of technologies out there to pick from. And, there's many, and I've talked about those in other editions of MetaPod. And how do you help organizations, or what should we be thinking about? What should we be looking at in terms of technologies? How do we, through all that, pick the right things, define what RAG is? What should we be looking at? What should be our filter, if you will, in terms of beginning to look at which technologies to pursue?
I'll start, and then Rishi, if you can talk about specific technologies. So firstly, again, I get back to the very core one. So it is, don't put a square peg in a round hole. Just because you can go on social media and there's a plethora, as you said, of technology solutions out there. And by the way, there'll be 100 more tomorrow and 100 more the day after that and 100 more the day after that, creating confusion and havoc in some cases. Think, before you start down that journey, what do I need? What is my business imperative? And look for a bespoke solution versus an off-the-shelf. Off-the-shelf, you'll be doodling and fussing with it for infinitum until kingdom come. Look for what I need as a business operation, and then look for a provider that can provide me a bespoke solution that is editable as I grow, but don't boil the ocean. Come in with a very crystallized, targeted solution. And there are some great things that we can do, and other businesses like Scobin can do on a smaller scale to fit the needs of your specific business imperative.
Perfect. So what are some of the technologies? I mean, I know it's changing. Next week it'll be different. But right now, what would be some of those key things we should be looking at, considering and opening our minds up to? I'm still want to hear about RAG.
Sure.
Hiding the RAG.
RAG? Sure. I'll talk about RAG a little bit. RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation, and it's essentially a methodology, if you will, that's been only around for, I would say, the last year or so, and it's still in development in terms of what...
So, RAG, what were those three words? RAG?
Retrieval Augmented Generation.
Retrieval Augmented Generation. That's a new one on me. Thank you.
It's essentially an application of large language models. So the large language models like ChatGPT, and there's a whole bunch of open source ones like, Gemini is one of them, but Llama 3, and there's a whole plethora of open source models as well, Mistral. And these large language models, if you think about what they are capable of doing, is they are capable of essentially, you can pose a natural language question and you get a response back, you get an answer back, right? And that's all great when you're just interacting with these technologies as a human, or if you just want to have a question answered on some document that you have, you can do that fairly easily. But if you're thinking in terms of business, in the business context, and let's say I have a 10,000 work orders, or I have 10,000 contracts, or just to give you some other examples where we've actually applied RAG, companies that have tons of property deeds, or companies that have technical specification documents that they need to search and find information from. What basically RAG enables is the ability to ask natural language questions across an entire domain of documents, right? So it's 10,000, 100,000, doesn't matter. Search through those pretty rapidly, and then essentially give you a compiled answer from the reference library. So the difference is essentially, it's just to give you an analogy, it's like being able to go to the librarian, and the librarian knows where all the books are, and they are essentially compiling the answer for you, and obviously they're also giving you the books. So similarly in the RAG, the LLM can essentially generate an answer and tell you where it found the answers from. So here's
I heard another LLM.
The large language models.
Large language models.
Large language models
Thank you.
like ChatGPT and Mistral and Gemini and a whole bunch of others. But this methodology, the RAG methodology, is how do you actually use large language models to sift through a large volume of unstructured data. Unstructured meaning it's all either PDFs or Word documents, or it's not in a tabular format. It's not nicely formatted as tables, because that technology has been around for like 40 years, 50 years, right? And you can find information in a tabular database very easily. But when it comes to being able to search through thousands of contracts or thousands of work orders or resumes or property deeds or engineering documents, and how do I find the right answer very quickly? This has only been possible in the last, or easily possible. I'm not saying it was impossible before, but it was way harder than it's been in the last one year or so. So using this RAG technology, you can, to kind of summarize, you can essentially ask natural language questions in almost any language, English, French, Spanish, doesn't matter. And you can get a response back with the answer along with where the large language model actually found the answer. So it's a game changer in how you actually conduct business. So whether you're trying to look at procurement contracts, or whether you're trying to look at for your engineers, you're trying to look at how do I get them the right information quickly without them having to sift through thousands of documents or any of that, those examples that I gave before. It's a game changer in terms of getting them the right data at the right time, much more quicker than was previously possible. And as a result, now you have a step change in how they actually go about their daily work.
Yeah, I think, Ron, the part that fascinates me all the time, and I learn as well. I'm an old school operations guy, and I kind of feel in awe of some of the stuff that Rishi and his team do every day. And we actually hadn't spoken about our other partner. Maybe at the end we get a chance we can talk about. We think we're dangerously smart on this stuff, but our other partner kind of puts us to shame on it. But I think about things like the ingestion of it, and because I got caught around this whole structured versus unstructured. What do you mean by structured and unstructured? And that kind of goes back to what we were talking about in that last segment, Ron, on the unstructured side. If a business has, or any of the people watching this has a bunch of reports or files, etc. I mean, hell, we're doing something right now where some of the information is handwritten on forms and files, but our system can not only ingest it, but the way it looks at it is not like the old OCR of my dad in bygone years. This now can actually interpret and understand the handwriting and then use semantic search to allow you to use it as leverageable information to help move your process forward. So that's beautiful, the way that you can now take any form of data, any form of information and put it in, and you don't have to have that nice database set up. So that is tremendous for me, is that finding that access to information and now usable data on this RAG system. And like you said, that's just one of the technologies is RAG.
So what are some of the other technologies you see that organizations may not be aware of? They should be in their radar, as we think about digitization going forward. Anything else? I mean, RAG is pretty fascinating. What are some other things that you would recommend going to school on a little bit?
Yeah, so I'd like to give an analogy before I talk about specific technology.
Sure.
So, in some of the developing countries, getting a phone, just a regular landline phone in the 80s was very hard. And then instead of trying to, connect everybody using landlines, they just leapfrog to having mobiles everywhere, right? So it's a complete leapfrog over that technology. And if you go to some of these developing countries, there's literally everybody has a cell phone, and they conduct almost everything, all kinds of business on cell phones. So by that analogy, what I was trying to get to is, similarly, some companies believe that, I just have a ton of paperwork, or I have data that is not in the digital format. So therefore, I need to spend $500,000 or $2 million in first trying to have a data lake and digitize everything and eliminate paper. All of that is great. All of that is good. But what's possible today with some of the AI technologies that is available out there is being able to essentially leapfrog over that. So you can today just take a picture of your paper-based documents and have it converted to information that you can then actually search through, analyze, and query directly without having to have spent a bunch of time and effort and money to have everything digitized in the first place. So you can essentially, even smaller firms or mid-sized firms can benefit from the value that is brought to by AI immediately and start to get the results. And that's what Mike and I were saying when we were talking about what is it you're trying to achieve, what's the business imperative, and then can we leverage some of these technologies to solve that problem? So it's not about the solution specifically, it's about how do you bring together these solutions, various solutions that are available, like essentially, the large language models, in order to get that result much better, quicker, faster.
All right, cool. All right. So I am still curious, though. What are other things, technology-wise? You mentioned RAG. That's pretty cool. Is there anything else that's kind of like cutting edge that you want to mention at this point before we move on?
So I think one of the things that has happened in the last, I would say, 1.5 years is because of large language models like ChatGPT, this one area of technology called generative AI, which is specifically around large language models, has been getting all the attention. And that's great because it does enable a lot of different new techniques and technologies that weren't possible before. But at the same time, there's been what we call classical AI, which it's not really that old, but machine learning and deep learning They've been around for 10, 15 years or so. And there's a lot of value in those as well that people sometimes tend to overlook because everybody's focused on this new shiny object that's generative AI. But when we look at deep learning, machine learning, there's a lot of problems that can be solved using just those classical models. As an example, we talked a little bit about demand forecasting. Demand forecasting is one of those areas where using machine learning and deep learning, you can get tremendously improved results than what was possible 15 years ago or even 10 years ago. And that's one area where, if you look at what are the applications of just machine learning and deep learning and how do you apply them in the context of business, whether that's demand forecasting, capacity planning, yield improvement, I can go on. But how do you utilize those, again, in the context of solving a problem to get the results that you're looking for? So if your problem is, I want to reduce inventory, I want to reduce stockouts, then that's one area to look at. Or if your problem is, I want to improve yield, or I want to improve quality in my production, that's again something that that can be looked at from a perspective of how do you utilize machine learning or deep learning models to achieve that, and not get caught up with, okay, I just want to focus on generative AI. So that's where starting as we said before, starting with the business imperative really comes in handy, because then you can have all of these different technologies that are out there, but then you're bringing them together into a holistic solution that specifically addresses a complex problem that you're trying to solve in the company.
All right, great. So this has been pretty fascinating. I'd like to pivot now and get into kind of not a wrap up, but kind of let's pull all this together now, right? So we know we need to do something about labor, training, turnover. That's something we have to deal with. We've got to be prepared, both people, processes, and technologies, and then being aware of what our options are, right? Why we choose those options. What would be your sage advice for somebody sitting in the audience saying, yep, I need to deal with all those? Can you button that up to, here's what you should go do? What's the go-do advice that you might offer?
I think it gets back to, and I appreciate the summary side of it. It gets back to, first one is come up with a strategy, a blank piece of paper. You have to sit down and go, really, what am I trying to achieve here? Where do I want to go? What direction? Unless you've built that out, and then use the collaborative force. I'm starting to sound like someone from Star Trek, but use like the Borg. But use, there's a lot of knowledge out there. There's a lot of help you can get, even from an advisory standpoint, but use the help you need in order to understand how that new strategy is going to apply. Because you don't have a core foundation, you can't build the roadmap. So start with a roadmap, build your roadmap.
All right, very good. Rishi, what might you add?
Yeah, so the next level after the strategy is building the plan, right? The plan for execution. And so the plan for execution, in our view, is really 3 steps. One is process review and gap assessment. So which is now that you have the imperative identified, what's the process? What are some of the gaps? And then going into step 2, what data do I need to capture in order to assess those gaps and validate if I have some hypothesis on what do I need to do to actually improve. So that data, then it's a deep dive into the different areas where the data might reside, bringing it together, analyze it, and then essentially the third step is, as a result of the better insights that you're getting from the data, now it's about the implementation of something different in your process, which then leads to the tangible benefits that you wanted to achieve in the first place. So that's really the 3 steps: process review and gap assessment, data capture and system design, and implementation and benefits realization.
Now I've got to ask you a question that's burning for me, and I've had a lot of conversations with some pretty smart people about it, and I have an opinion. I'm going to see if you'll validate it or not. When you get down to actually implementing the technology, right, we're going to pull the trigger, we're going to do this. I have an argument that if you can't complete a cycle to a win inside 90 days, you probably shouldn't do it, because everything's going to change at the end of 90 days anyway. Would you agree or disagree? What's been your experience?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Ron. I believe that in today's day and age where you have a plethora of technologies available, where you can spin up entire machine clusters on AWS or Google Cloud or Microsoft Azure, you have the ability today to have that iterative loop of just problem solving and then letting the big technology sort itself out later. So I want to solve this problem right now. Can I solve that problem in 3 months using the technology, open source technologies that are available out there? Can I get the result? And then that can essentially form the backbone of, if you want to now scale it across 100 locations that you may have, by all means, go ahead and essentially have a big implementation to do that. But with the technologies that are available out there, why don't we just do a quick pilot
proof of concept
that you can execute in 60 days, 90 days, and get the result that you're looking for. And it's entirely possible. I mean, we've had several instances where that's been the case, in terms of getting results. And then we either scale it up with open source or with proprietary technology.
Ron, I would want to add something there.
I would just add, Ron, no matter what you do, engage your people as well. If you want a quick result, win the hearts and minds, right? I sound like I'm talking from the movie Gladiator, but, at the end of the day, when you get back to your office and you're laying out your plan, embrace the people and let them be collaborative, because, sometimes the quickest result, the quickest win may not have the best fiduciary result for you, but it'll win the hearts and minds and create momentum amongst your platform, amongst your people. So, work with your folks and don't avoid, don't do it to them. People who think they don't like things being done to them, they want to be part of the solution.
Yeah, I was pushing for whether you guys would agree with an assertion of mine that, opportunity costs or the loss of opportunity to actually move the needle for performance, like waiting a year to see something happen isn't something we have an appetite for, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And I advocate that if you can't see a real result and measure something pretty darn quickly, you got to question why you're even doing it.
Absolutely. And like we discussed before, whenever there's a step change, nobody there's not that many people that have essentially seen all of the different possibilities of this technology, right? So none of us have seen what's going to be possible in the next 5 years or 10 years. But if we can start to apply what's available out there today onto problems that are existing today, then you can start to get those results immediately. So, right? So in the sense that, by that same analogy, if you're looking at the internet in 1999 or 2000, we didn't have all the answers. But if you could start to utilize the internet and apply it to specific areas, you could get those results without having to wait for
the big bang
of the companies to catch up and democratize access to it, right, afterwards. So by that analogy, utilize, just to kind of summarize it, explore your business problem, understand your business problem, explore the technologies that are available out there, and then start applying them to get results today. And then essentially, you can continue that.
Rinse and repeat. Rinse and repeat. I describe it as, digital transformation is death by 1,000 cuts. It's many, 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 many small iterations that get you there. There's no big boom, right. We've solved the world's problems. This has been fantastic. How do people get in touch with you guys? If they want to learn more and find out, how this stuff works, how do they get in touch with you guys?
Obviously, we can post you and provide you our emails, mike@scovanen.com, rishi@scovanen.com. We can also publish our phone number for you. But and we have a sales@Scovanen. If there's a general question, sales@scovanen.com. Please send an email and we'll jump right on it and answer your questions and engage. I mean, we love having this kind of dialogue.
All right. Awesome. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. This has been fantastic, and looking forward to feedback from our audience after they get a chance to sample some of your wisdom. So thank you so much.
We appreciate it.
Thank you for joining MetaPod. For requests on topics or to ask questions, you can connect with Ron Crabtree 3 ways: via email at metapod@metaexperts.com, via LinkedIn, or by calling him directly at 734-425-1455, extension 103. Lastly, if you love the show, please consider leaving a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app. We truly appreciate all your support.